Being mocked for what one wears may seem trivial to some, but to a person growing up in an environment where appearance defines worth, it cuts deeper than most wounds. When the people closest to you, your own family, turn your struggles into entertainment, it builds a pain that lingers for years. The label, thrift store girl, wasn't just an insult about wearing used clothes. It was a declaration of inferiority. A reminder that no matter how much effort was made, she would always be the one who didn't fit in. Each outfit became a story of judgment, each glance a silent reminder of exclusion. Those words carved in visible scars, teaching her to see herself through their mockery. What they never realized was that while they were laughing, they were shaping the very determination that would one day silence them. Every family event became an emotional battlefield. The laughter in the room wasn't the warm kind. It was sharp, directed, and meant to remind her of her place. While others basked in compliments for their looks or their accomplishments, she endured whispers about her cheap taste. It wasn't just about clothes. It was about power. They believed that by making her feel small, they could maintain their illusion of superiority. But beneath that humiliation grew something they couldn't see: resilience. Each insult was like a seed buried deep within her, watered by pain but destined to bloom into strength. As the years passed, the cruelty evolved into silence and subtle dismissal. The conversations that once included her became shorter, colder, and often ended with a laugh behind her back. They treated her presence like a burden, a reminder of what they never wanted to be associated with. She started to fade into the background, finding comfort only in solitude. The clothes that were once a target of mockery became her shield. They represented her reality, one she didn't choose, but one she learned to survive in. What no one saw was the quiet endurance forming behind that calm exterior. She learned to absorb every insult without showing pain, to walk away instead of fighting back, and to dream silently where no one could ridicule her. Family gatherings were supposed to be moments of love and belonging, but for her, they were a cycle of emotional survival. Every smile was forced, every word measured. Sitting at the same table with people who laughed at her hardships created a deep ache she carried long after the evening ended. She stopped expecting kindness. Acceptance became a fantasy. Once she stopped chasing the day, she realized their love was conditional. That realization was painful, but it was also freeing. She understood she didn't need their validation to exist, and that one day she would create a life that spoke for itself. Through the sting of their laughter and the loneliness of being unseen, she found the beginning of her power. What they intended as humiliation became her motivation. Every cruel comment turned into fuel for her silent rise, and every mocking glance became a reminder of why she had to prove to herself that she was worth far more than they ever believed. There's a kind of pain that doesn't come from strangers, but from the people whose approval you crave the most. Hearing constant comparisons and seeing favoritism unfold in your own home creates a wound that never fully heals. When one sister is praised for her beauty, confidence, and expensive clothes while the other is told to be grateful for what you have, it forms a silent hierarchy in the family. The one at the bottom learns early that love in that household comes with conditions, status, image, and compliance. Every time her sister twirled in a new designer dress, it wasn't just about fashion, it was a performance of worth. And every time she stood beside her, she could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her, whispering that she didn't belong. It's not the clothes that sting, it's the message behind them. She wasn't simply being told she looked plain, she was being told she didn't deserve more. Her sister's pride became a mirror that reflected everything she supposedly lacked: money, beauty, importance. The constant contrast between them wasn't just visible in what they wore, but in how they were treated. One was celebrated, the other was tolerated. And in that difference, she began to understand how unfairly love could be measured in a family that valued image over heart. The people who should have lifted her up instead reminded her of where she stood, always beneath someone else's shine. She learned to shrink herself to keep peace. Arguing felt useless when every response was twisted into proof that she was bitter or jealous. So she started choosing silence. Silence became her armor, a way to survive in a space where every word could be turned against her. She realized that speaking up for herself would only invite more cruelty, so she built walls instead. With each quiet moment, she found small pieces of strength and endurance. What they saw as weakness was actually the foundation of her resilience. The more she stayed quiet, the more she observed, and what she observed taught her how deeply people's kindness could depend on appearances. In her silence, she began to dream of a life that didn't revolve around approval. The world outside her family became a place of possibility, not comparison. But still, she carried that ache, the ache of knowing she would never be enough for those who should have loved her most. Every snide comment, every dismissive glance became another reason to build her own path quietly, away from their judgmental eyes. The silence that once felt like defeat started to transform into focus. She began to understand that while they wasted energy maintaining an image, she could use hers to build something real. Being told to stay quiet taught her something powerful. That peace is sometimes more valuable than proving a point. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. They never realized that the girl they thought they were silencing was actually learning how to rise without noise. What began as survival slowly became strength. And in that stillness, she was preparing for the day when her truth would no longer need words to be heard. Working endless hours without telling anyone wasn't about proving a point, it was about survival. When no one believes in you, the only thing left is quiet persistence. Each early morning and late night became a small act of defiance, a silent reminder that even the one who's underestimated can build something remarkable when no one is watching. Saving every dollar became a secret mission. Not because there was something to hide, but because there was no one to share it with. Each paycheck wasn't just money. It was freedom slowly taking form. The family that mocked her had no idea how much discipline it took to turn pain into purpose. While they laughed, she learned. While they showed off, she planned. Every sacrifice, every skipped luxury was a promise to herself that one day she would never have to rely on anyone again. There were no celebrations when small milestones were reached, no one cheering for her progress. The world she lived in had conditioned her to expect nothing, so she gave herself everything she could in return: determination, patience, and hard work. Nights spent at her computer became her classroom. Mistakes became her teachers. What others called luck later was actually the result of countless silent failures she faced alone. She learned that dreams don't need validation, they need commitment. And with every step forward, she discovered that success is far more personal when it's built in silence. The loneliness that once haunted her became the space where she created her strength. From that quiet determination, something real began to grow. A business started to take shape, not from inherited money or family connections, but from persistence and faith. She had no one to guide her, no one to open doors, so she built her own. She studied, failed, learned, and tried again until the work started to pay off. Every setback became another lesson in resilience. Every rejection became a reason to work harder. While her family judged her for the life she appeared to have, she was creating one they could never imagine. Success wasn't sudden. It was earned inch by inch, through unseen battles and unspoken sacrifices. The business she created became her safe haven, a world where she finally had control. It was built on long nights, quiet prayers, and the kind of effort that no one notices until it's too late. The same people who once saw her as weak would one day call her lucky, not knowing how much she had lost and endured to stand where she was. She had turned her pain into progress, her silence into focus, and her rejection into motivation. The truth was simple but powerful. She didn't build her success to prove them wrong. She built it to prove herself right. The strength she found in solitude was worth more than their approval ever could be. What began as an escape from humiliation became a legacy of independence. And though no one saw it happening, every step she took in silence was leading her closer to the life they once told her she could never have. It's strange how quickly people change when they sense you have something they need. The same mouths that once laughed at your struggles suddenly learn to speak in sweetness. The same eyes that used to roll at your dreams begin to sparkle with false admiration. That's what happens when quiet success becomes visible. Those who dismissed her efforts started to reach out with unexpected warmth, pretending to care, masking their curiosity behind shallow affection. They didn't see the nights of work or the pain that built her strength. They only saw the results. Their tone softened, their attitude shifted, and the same family that once mocked her now wanted to be part of her life again. It was almost surreal to watch their transformation. The people who used to treat her as invisible now called her constantly, asking how she was doing, pretending to be proud. But every word they spoke felt hollow. The truth was clear. They hadn't changed out of love. They had changed out of interest. It's easy to love someone when they become useful. Their sudden kindness was not a reflection of guilt, but of greed. The hypocrisy was almost unbearable. The same voices that once said, "You'll never make it," were now asking for advice, pretending they had always believed in her. It was a performance, one she saw through easily, but she played along. There was no anger, just quiet awareness. She had learned that sometimes revenge doesn't come through confrontation. It comes through calm composure in the face of those who once belittled you. Her sister, who once paraded wealth like a trophy, was no different. She had always been the family's pride, the one who could do no wrong. But jealousy doesn't need words. It speaks through glances and silence. When her sister first saw the truth, it was an accident. A moment too quick to hide, a flash of a number that shattered her illusion of superiority. $9 million. The amount wasn't just money. It was the symbol of everything she'd been denied. The respect, the dignity, the equality she was never given. That one glance changed everything. Suddenly, the sister who used to smirk now stared in disbelief, her confidence cracking in silence. For the first time, the balance of power shifted. It wasn't pride that filled her in that moment, it was peace. Not because of the money itself, but because the years of humiliation had finally found their answer. All those times she was called less than faded in an instant. The laughter that used to echo around her was replaced by a silence that spoke louder than any insult ever had. Watching her sister's expression change from superiority to shock was a quiet victory, not out of revenge, but out of justice. For years, she had been made to feel small, and now, without saying a single word, she had proven that worth has never been about appearances or status. It had always been about perseverance, and finally, the truth was undeniable. The moment the truth came out, everything around her shifted. The same relatives who once mocked her silence now struggled to find words. The whispers that once carried insults were replaced by uneasy quiet. $9 million in her account didn't just change their perception of her, it exposed who they truly were. All those years of belittling and exclusion was suddenly erased in their eyes, as if money could rewrite the past. They tried to act normal, but their discomfort was visible. The laughter that used to follow her every appearance had vanished. What filled the room now was tension, shock, and a forced politeness that felt almost theatrical. The power dynamic that once defined their relationship had shattered, and they didn't know how to rebuild it. The sudden silence spoke volumes. For years, they had treated her as if she didn't belong at the same table, but now no one dared to meet her eyes. Their pride had always come from a sense of superiority, yet in that moment, their confidence crumbled. The ones who laughed the loudest were now the quietest. Their smiles were uneasy, their tone hesitant. The realization that the person they had ridiculed was now wealthier and stronger than all of them combined left them exposed. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the power they had lost, the control they no longer had over her. The respect they suddenly tried to show felt artificial, born out of guilt and fear, not genuine affection. For her, the silence was louder than any apology could have been. It was the acknowledgement she never received in words, but could finally see in their eyes. She didn't gloat or remind them of their cruelty. She didn't need to. The look on their faces was enough. Years of humiliation had been avenged not through revenge, but through transformation. The same people who once saw her as a burden now struggled to hide their shame. She could sense their unease, the way they avoided certain topics, the way their laughter stopped when she entered the room. It was strange to realize that she didn't need their validation anymore. The very approval she had chased all her life no longer mattered. As the atmosphere around her changed, so did her emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing them uncomfortable, only a quiet realization that she had outgrown their world. Their silence didn't empower her, it liberated her. The weight of years spent trying to prove herself was gone. She didn't owe them explanations, gratitude, or forgiveness. For the first time, she was free, not just financially, but emotionally. The laughter that had once wounded her had finally lost its meaning. What remained was peace, a deep, still kind of peace that comes when you stop seeking acceptance from those who were never capable of giving it. The silence that once made her feel small had become her victory song, reminding her that true power doesn't come from being louder. It comes from finally having nothing left to prove. Standing before those who once ridiculed her, she finally spoke, not out of anger, but from a place of clarity. The words came softly, yet each one carried the weight of years spent in silence. It wasn't about confronting them or seeking revenge. It was about releasing herself from the chains of their judgment. For so long, their opinions had shaped her view of herself, but now she saw them for who they really were, people blinded by pride and prejudice. Speaking her truth wasn't an act of defiance, it was an act of healing. She didn't need them to understand her journey or her pain. She just needed to let it out, to finally breathe without carrying the burden of their mockery. The power in that moment didn't come from the words themselves, but from the peace that followed them. There was no raised voice, no bitterness, only honesty. She told them how deeply their laughter had cut, how their rejection had shaped her, and how every cruel remark had pushed her toward the life she had built. They listened in silence, some looking down, others pretending to be unaffected, but every face carried the shadow of guilt. For years, she had dreamed of this moment, thinking it would feel like victory. Instead, it felt like closure. She realized that proving herself was never the point. It was freeing herself from the need to be seen through their eyes. Her truth was no longer something to defend. It was something to own. When the words were finally spoken, she felt lighter. The pain that had lived inside her began to dissolve, replaced by an unfamiliar calm. She had always believed that forgiveness meant accepting what had been done, but now she understood it differently. Forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about reclaiming her peace. She didn't forgive because they deserved it. She forgave because she refused to let their cruelty define the rest of her life. That was her real triumph. Not the money, not the success, but the quiet strength to let go of the past without bitterness. As she walked away, she realized something profound. Wealth had not changed her. It had simply revealed who she had become. She was no longer the girl they mocked, nor the woman they pitied. She was free, not because she had $9 million, but because she had finally detached her worth from their validation. The judgment that once haunted her was powerless now. Their silence no longer hurt. It comforted her. It was proof that she had finally risen above the noise. In the stillness that followed, she smiled, not with pride, but with peace. The story that began in pain had ended in strength. The laughter that once belittled her had been replaced by the sound of her own freedom. For the first time, she wasn't defined by what they thought, said, or believed. She was defined by her journey, her resilience, and her ability to rise without hate. That was the real victory, the kind that doesn't need applause, just quiet acceptance of how far she had come. The journey from humiliation to empowerment wasn't built overnight. It was forged in silence, patience, and self-belief. So what began as years of being mocked and dismissed by her own family became a story of transformation, proof that pain can become purpose when you refuse to give up. The girl once called Thrift store girl didn't rise to seek revenge. She rose to reclaim her worth. Every insult, every moment of exclusion, every tear that once fell in private became the foundation of her strength. She learned that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that their words never defined you. When the world finally saw her wealth, what they didn't see was the journey behind it, the loneliness, the quiet sacrifices, the strength to keep going when no one believed in her. And when those who once laughed stood in silence, she realized she no longer needed their approval. She had built something far greater than financial freedom. She had built peace. Her story became a testament that true power doesn't come from wealth, status, or validation. It comes from surviving what was meant to break you and walking away whole. In the end, her victory wasn't the money in her account, but the freedom in her heart. The freedom to forgive without forgetting, to rise without seeking applause, and to exist without needing anyone's permission. The girl who once stood alone in a room full of laughter now stood strong in her truth, untouchable and at peace. Her story reminds us that being underestimated is not a curse, it's a hidden blessing. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not revenge at all, but quiet success lived on your own terms.